Welcome back to Book Summaries channel. Have you ever wondered why some people are naturally more persuasive, or why you find yourself saying yes to things before the pitch even begins? Today, we are exploring the revolutionary psychological insights of Robert Cialdini in his masterpiece, Pre-Suasion. We're going to learn how the most successful communicators don't just change minds. They change the mental state of the audience before they even deliver their message. Cialdini introduces the concept of persuasion, which is the practice of getting people ready to be influenced before they encounter a message. He explains that the secret of the ultra-persuaders is not in the message itself, but in what happens in the moments immediately before the message is delivered. These moments create a privileged window where the audience is particularly receptive to specific ideas. By strategically directing attention, a communicator can prime the audience to value certain aspects of the upcoming offer more highly. This chapter sets the stage for understanding how our environment and initial focus dictate our subsequent choices. It challenges the traditional view that persuasion is about the strength of an argument. Instead, it argues that the context and timing of the request are often more powerful than the content. We learn that people are most likely to say yes when they have been subtly prepared to do so. The introduction makes it clear that influence is a science that can be mastered by anyone willing to study human attention. Mastery begins with recognizing that the mind is always responding to the most recent cues it has received. This chapter explores the idea of privileged moments, which are brief periods when a person is uniquely open to a particular suggestion. Cialdini explains that these moments are created when we direct someone's attention to a specific concept or feeling. For example, asking someone if they consider themselves helpful makes them significantly more likely to help you moments later. This is because the question brings the helpfulness identity to the front of their mind. We learn that human beings have a tendency to assign outsized importance to whatever is currently in their focus. Persuaders can create these moments by using openers that align with the goal of the eventual request. It is not about trickery, but about highlighting a genuine aspect of the situation that favors the persuader's outcome. The chapter emphasizes that our decisions are rarely based on a complete analysis of all facts. Instead, we react to the most prominent information available in the moment of choice. By controlling that prominence, a communicator can guide the decision-making process. These moments are fleeting, so timing is absolutely critical in the persuasive process. Cialdini dives deep into the psychology of attention, stating that what is focal is presumed causal. This means that when we focus on something, we naturally assume it is the most important or influential factor in a situation. This psychological shortcut is why celebrities are often blamed or credited for things they didn't do. They are simply the most visible people involved. In persuasion, if you can draw someone's attention to a specific feature of a product, they will automatically think that feature is the most important one. The chapter provides examples of how background images on a website, like clouds or pennies, can influence customers to prioritize comfort or price respectively. This happens subconsciously, without the person realizing their priorities have been shifted by a simple visual cue. We are taught that the mind cannot focus on everything at once, so it uses attention as a filter for importance. Persuaders use this filter to their advantage by ensuring the right information is at the center of the audience's gaze. It becomes clear that leading a person's attention is the same as leading their mind. To influence someone, you must first become the master of their focus. Building on the previous chapter, Cialdini explains how our brains mistake attention for importance and causality. He describes studies where the mere position of a person in a room influenced who observers thought was leading a conversation. If you are looking at someone, you are more likely to think they are the one in charge of the interaction. This focalism can be used in marketing by making a specific brand or benefit the most visually or mentally prominent option. The chapter also discusses how focus can be manipulated through leading questions or specific physical environments. When a person is focused on a single option, they often fail to consider alternatives, leading to a yes by default. This is why salespeople try to keep your attention on their product rather than letting you look at a competitor's. We also learned that this effect is so strong it can even influence legal testimonies and police interrogations. If a camera is focused only on a suspect during a confession, viewers are more likely to believe the confession was voluntary. Awareness of this bias is the only way to guard against it. For the persuader, it is the most efficient tool for creating a sense of urgency or value. This chapter identifies the specific things that naturally capture and hold human attention, which Cialdini calls Caesars. The most powerful Caesars are the sexual, the threatening, and the different. Because these elements are tied to survival and reproduction, our brains are hardwired to notice them immediately. A persuader can use these cues to stop an audience in their tracks and prepare them for a message. However, Cialdini warns that these cues must be relevant to the message, or they will backfire by distracting the audience from the actual goal. For instance, using a sexual image to sell insurance is often ineffective because the cue doesn't lead the mind toward the product's benefits. The chapter also discusses the Zeigarnik effect, where our minds remain focused on unfinished tasks or stories. By starting with a mystery or an unsolved problem, a communicator can keep an audience engaged for much longer. We learn that the best way to hold attention is to tap into these primal interests. Once attention is seized, it must then be channeled toward the desired action. The art of persuasion involves selecting the Caesar that best fits the persuasive objective. While some things seize our attention, others act as magnets, keeping us focused on them over time. Cialdini identifies self-relevance as one of the most powerful magnetizers. When a message is about you, your brain pays much more attention and processes the information more deeply. This is why personalized marketing is so effective. It pulls the consumer in by making the content part of their own identity. Another magnetizer is the use of mystery stories that keep the audience searching for an answer. By presenting a puzzle at the beginning of a presentation, you ensure that the audience follows you until the very end to find the resolution. The chapter also discusses the next-in-line effect, where we are so focused on our own performance that we fail to pay attention to what happens immediately before us. Persuaders can use these insights to structure their interactions so that the audience remains mentally glued to the pitch. It is not enough to just get someone's attention, you must know how to keep it. Magnetizers ensure that the persuasive state lasts long enough for the core message to take root. By making the audience feel like they are part of the story, you minimize their resistance. Cialdini argues that the main mechanism of persuasion is the power of association. Our brains are networks of interconnected ideas, and activating one idea automatically primes related ideas. If you use words associated with strength, people will subconsciously begin to feel and act more decisively. The chapter explains that language is not just a way to convey thought, but a way to direct it through these associations. By using metaphors and imagery that align with your goal, you can influence the audience's perception without them realizing it. For example, describing a problem as a virus leads people to want to isolate it, while describing it as a beast leads them to want to cage it. We learn that every word we choose has a baggage of associations that can help or hinder our persuasive efforts. The most successful persuaders carefully select their words to trigger the right mental pathways. This process happens at a level below conscious awareness, making it incredibly difficult to resist. It is about creating a mental environment where the desired conclusion feels like the most natural fit. Association is the glue that binds the persuasive cue to the final action. This chapter explores how our physical environment acts as a constant persuasive influence. Cialdini calls this persuasive geographies, the places we put ourselves in that dictate our thoughts and behaviors. For instance, A student is likely to study more effectively in a library because the environment is saturated with associations of learning and quiet. Similarly, writers often find they produce different types of work depending on where they are sitting. If a writer is surrounded by academic texts, their tone will become more formal. If they are in a cafe, it might become more conversational. We can persuade ourselves by intentionally designing our workspaces to trigger the mindsets we want to achieve. This also applies to influencing others. The location of a meeting can change the tone and outcome of a negotiation. A hospital setting primes people for care and health, while a sleek corporate boardroom primes them for competition. Our surroundings are constantly whispering suggestions to our subconscious. By recognizing this, we can take control of the external cues that shape our internal states. Geography is not just about location. It is about the mental space that a location creates. Cialdini explains the underlying mechanics of why persuasion works so consistently. It is based on the idea that the human mind is associative and reactive rather than purely logical. When an idea is primed, it becomes more accessible, and because of our ease of processing bias, we assume that easy-to-recall ideas are correct. The chapter highlights that persuasion is most effective when it is subtle and doesn't trigger the audience's persuasion radar. If people feel they are being manipulated, they will immediately push back and the effect is lost. Therefore, the persuasive cue must seem like a natural part of the environment or conversation. We also learn that these cues have a limited shelf life. They work best in the immediate moments following the prime. This is why the privileged moment is so important to capture quickly. Cialdini emphasizes that persuasion doesn't force people to do things they hate, but it makes them much more likely to do things they were already open to. It acts as a catalyst that speeds up the acceptance of a message. Understanding these constraints helps us apply persuasive techniques more ethically and effectively. It is a tool for alignment, not for coercion. In this chapter, Cialdini revisits his famous 6 principles of persuasion from his previous work: reciprocity, liking, social proof, authority, scarcity, and consistency. He explains how these principles can be enhanced through persuasion. For example, before using the principle of reciprocity, giving a gift, you can persuade the recipient by highlighting your own sacrifice or the thoughtfulness of the gift. This makes the urge to give back even stronger. Similarly, social proof is more effective if you first prime the audience with the idea of belonging or following the crowd. Cialdini shows that these principles are not just static rules, but dynamic forces that can be amplified by the right openers. We see how the principles of influence and the techniques of persuasion work together to create a powerful system of communication. Each principle is a pathway to yes, and persuasion is the process of clearing the obstacles on that path. The chapter serves as a bridge between his classic research and these new insights. It reminds us that influence is built on a foundation of human social psychology. Mastery of the 6 principles is essential for anyone who wants to be a leader or a successful communicator. Cialdini introduces a brand new 7th principle of influence: unity. This is the feeling that a communicator and an audience share a common identity. It goes beyond liking. It is about being of a group rather than just like a group. Unity is most commonly found in families, but it can also be created through shared ethnicity, location, or even intense shared experiences. When people feel a sense of unity, the barriers to persuasion almost entirely disappear because they feel they are helping a part of themselves. The chapter explores 2 main ways to create unity: through being together, shared identity, and acting together, synchronous activity. For example, groups that sing or march together develop a deep bond that makes them highly susceptible to mutual influence. Business leaders can create unity by involving employees or customers in the co-creation of products, making them feel like insiders. This principle is perhaps the most powerful of all because it taps into our deepest social needs. Unity turns you and me into us. In the state of us, persuasion becomes unnecessary because cooperation is the default. This chapter focuses specifically on the being together aspect of the unity principle. Cialdini explains how shared genes, or a shared sense of place, can lead to massive compliance. People are significantly more likely to do favors for those they perceive as kin, even if the relation is distant or symbolic. This is why marketers use family-themed imagery to build trust with their audience. The chapter also discusses the we is shared effect, where the use of inclusive language like we and our can subtly build a bridge of identity. We learn about the power of localism. People are more likely to support ideas or products that come from their own hometown or neighborhood. This sense of belonging creates a protective shell around the group, making them more loyal to each other and more resistant to outside influence. A persuader who can honestly tap into a shared identity will find that their message is accepted with very little scrutiny. It is about finding the common ground that makes the audience feel like you are one of them. When identity is shared, trust is implicit. This is the ultimate form of social influence. Cialdini explores how doing things in unison can create a powerful sense of unity and influence. Whether it is a religious ritual, a military march, or even just tapping a table in time with someone else, synchronous action creates a blurring of the self. When we move together, our brains begin to see the other person as part of our own identity. This leads to increased cooperation, liking, and sacrifice for the group. The chapter highlights how music is one of the most effective tools for creating this type of unity because it naturally encourages people to move to the same beat. In a business context, getting a client to collaborate on a draft or a plan can create this acting together effect, making them more likely to support the final version. We also learned that advice seeking is a powerful way to create unity. When you ask someone for advice, you move them into a collaborative mindset, whereas asking for an opinion keeps them in a critical, outsider mindset. Acting together creates a bond that is felt physically and emotionally. It is a shortcut to deep social connection. In these moments of togetherness, we are most open to the influence of our partners. In the final chapters, Cialdini addresses the ethical implications of using such powerful psychological tools. He argues that while persuasion is a neutral tool, the way it is used can have significant consequences for a person's or a company's reputation. He introduces the triple tumor of unethical influence, which describes how dishonest persuasion leads to 3 negative outcomes: poor employee performance, high employee turnover, and increased employee dishonesty. If a company encourages its employees to deceive customers, those employees will eventually turn that dishonesty back on the company itself. Cialdini stresses that ethical persuasion is about highlighting truths that are already present, not about inventing lies. Using persuasion to mislead people may work in the short term, but it destroys the trust necessary for long-term success. The chapter serves as a warning that the dark side of influence is a dead end. We are encouraged to use these techniques to build genuine connections and to make it easier for people to see the true value in what we offer. True influence should be a win-win for both parties. Character is the ultimate foundation of a persuader's power. Without ethics, influence is just manipulation, and manipulation always fails in the end.